Hey there, Smite fans. Aggro here, and welcome into another edition of SPL Waiting Room. A big show for you here today. We've reached a benchmark in the SPL season. Every team has played each other once, so we're going to sit down with some of our analysts and talk about each team and how they've looked so far. And we've got a brand new interactive quiz for you later on in the show, so make sure you're ready for that. But the most important news coming to the SPL this week is that the Renegades have made a roster move. They are benching Solo or Troll for this week, in which they have a doubleheader. So this is an important week for the Renegades, and they find themselves with ROWE, their coach, as their solo laner once again. Now, we've got a quote from ROWE. You'll be able to read this in its entirety on the SMITEPro Twitter a little bit later on, but two things stand out to me, and I want to read them verbatim. Quote, "For this week versus Sanguine and Obey, I will be playing in the solo lane while Solo or Troll is moved to the bench temporarily. I feel it's important to emphasize that this came at the request of the players and was not my idea, though it is my choice to agree, and therefore I obviously believe it is the right move for us to make." Later on, ROWE says, quote, "The current plan is that Jacob will be given the opportunity to earn his way back onto the main roster after this week, and that this will be a full team decision." Again, ROWE had a little bit more to say. You'll be able to find this quote in its entirety on the SMITEPro Twitter. It is also worth noting that Solo or Troll posted his own statement via Twitlonger, which I am copy-pasting in the chat right now, and a quote from ROWE at the exact same time. Bringing in FINCH and MYFLIN to talk about this. Guys, a huge move for the Renegades in order to make this in a doubleheader week. FINCH, what's your initial reaction?
I'm realized, by being honest, I've thought Solo Troll has looked certainly has struggled lately. The whole team has. He's been one of those guys coming to
FINCH, unfortunately, your internet is betraying you a little bit, so hopefully we'll be able to get your thoughts in a little bit on that. MYFLIN, let's go to you. What was your initial reaction?
It seems like a puzzling decision for me for the team in general. If we see SOT make a return to the team at a later date, he's obviously going to feel maybe even just a little bit uncertain in his positioning in the team, just knowing that he could be benched at any point. Going into this week with a doubleheader on a team that's already been struggling in the first part of Phase 2 is hugely questioning to me. These guys need these wins now so they can make a real contentious standing in the league. It seems like if there is an opportunity for Solo or Troll to come back at a later date, he should not have been removed from the playfield at all in this week.
I think that it's a good point to bring up, because if they feel like that Solo is going to come back and be ready to go, then is this the right week to make this move in the week where you have a doubleheader? Now, reading Solo or Troll's statement, he agrees that his mental was not in the right spot, that he was down on his confidence. I don't know that benching him really does that a whole lot of favors. From a former player's perspective, MYFLIN, how important is it to make a change like this, even in the face of a doubleheader week, if your practice culture is not where it needs to be?
Yeah, it's a hard question for sure. It depends. How bad is it, truthfully? If all four players are agreeing that they don't want to play with Solo or Troll now, it means that he must be unbearable in scrims. He must be unbearable in comms. It's got to be so hard to interact with them. And if that's the case, and it really does come down to Solo or Troll's confidence, as you said earlier, it's going to be just awful to work through. Solo or Troll is going to have a bigger confidence shake. His position within the team is not nearly as secure. I think it's hugely questioning. I'm so absolutely concerned about it. I think that, if anything, this is only going to put a spotlight on the issues. If Solo or Troll is able to return to the team in the future, he's going to be constantly worried about it. I can't imagine that this is the right call, and I would be surprised if we see Solo or Troll resume his position as the solo laner for Renegades.
Well, that's the way that we're going to have to watch this team and see what they decide to do in future weeks. We'll see if Solo or Troll is back, if ROWE is going to stay, or if they're going to make a full-scale roster change later on, as those are the options available to the Renegades. We'll be talking more about the Renegades a little bit later on in the show, and certainly in context of how they've looked throughout Phase 2 so far. But first, we've got to recap exactly what we've seen in Phase 2 so far, at least last week. As per usual, we've got Dave and Finch with the recap as written by Finch and Dave.
Welcome back to another episode of the SPL Weekly Recap. This is for Week 5 with Finch and Dolson here. Remember, the way that this works is that we write these recaps for each other and then read them for the very first time live here on this program. So we're going to run right into it. To start off the week, we have one of the most anticipated matchups of the year, Ghost versus Radiance. Ghost came into this matchup fresh off a 0-2 loss to Sanguine, and Radiance a 2-1 loss to Spacestation. So this one was to keep pace with the top of the standings. Radiance simply brought it on Friday afternoon and got the clean sweep over Ghost 2-0.
The last set on Friday saw the LatAm Legends take on the Obey Operators. Sometimes the standings can mislead us, and sets that look one-sided end up competitive. I said sometimes, and this was not one of those times. Sanguine, who seem to have gotten back into a rhythm the last few weeks, played their trademark style against Obey to great success.
Yeah, Dave, I have to admit, this Saturday matchup between the Knights and the Renegades just feels weird to talk about. There's not much to break down, as it's an off day for Renegades, to say the least. 2 games, 2 blowouts in similar fashion, give Knights the set 2-0.
EUNITED had a nasty doubleheader weekend, starting with this set against SSG. So it's EUNITED here against SSG to end the day on Saturday. EUNITED fought valiantly, actually holding early game leads in all 3 games, but struggled to find ways to close out the game. SSG gave EUNITED every bit of their due respect and won a contested set 2-1.
Yeah, Sunday featured 2 top versus bottom matchups headlined by Ghost versus Obey in the morning slot. Now, it is a 2-0 for Ghost, but Game 2 would be a lot closer than Ghost would have hoped for. If it feels like I'm brushing over Game 1, it's because that's almost the humane thing to do. 28-5 in kills for Ghost, and Sam has 13 of them on Nemesis.
Final set of the weekend as we move on to the conclusion of EUNITED's doubleheader weekend. And it was a real roller coaster in that most people seemed to like it and may be a bit queasy by the end. It was a great set for Cupid Mid, piloted by BMT and Hurrywind, and it was also a big set for early game leads, not meaning a whole lot. In the end, Game 3 wasn't very close at all, as Radiance sealed up the 2-1 win that was closer than anyone expected. EUNITED have looked better lately, but those consolation prizes mean less and less the deeper we go into phase number 2. What a lot of fun week number 5 was here in the SPL. Yeah. Always great to recap it with you, Finch. That is week 5 in the SPL, as told by Finch and Dave, and as written by Dave and Finch. Here's to looking forward to week number 6.
Thank you, Dave and Finch. Of course, you can catch those in their entirety on the SMITEPro YouTube channel, where you should be subscribed right now, because we've got a ton of great content coming there, as well as Smite VOD on YouTube. That's where you can find all of the VODs from the SPL. Speaking of Dave and Finch, we had Finch, now we have Dave. All-Star, subbing in, tag team, baby. The tag team champs coming in. We got the other man, Dave Olson. Dave, thanks for stepping in on short notice, because we've got a big segment here to go over. Every single SPL team has now played each other at least once, and these are the results. Radiance up on top at 7-1, Space Station Gaming at 6-1 in second place, and so on and so forth. EUNITED still winless through the first third of phase number 2. And I want to start, fellas, at the top, because this Radiance team is one that kind of struggled a little bit in phase 1. We expected a little bit more from them. They really hit their stride right before phase 1 playoffs. Went to the finals of phase 1 playoffs where they lost to Ghost, but they've really stayed red hot ever since. MYFLIN, I want to start with you. What are some of the big keys that you've seen to Radiance's success? All right, thank you, MYFLIN. Nice try there, buddy. We're having some tough times here on the SPL waiting room. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. So, Dave, the floor is yours, my friend. Talk to me about Radiance.
Tag me in. Look, I think the thing with Radiance is it's continuing this momentum, right? We saw in phase 1, it took them a little while to get things going, and completely the opposite on the first set of round robins here in phase 2. They only lost to SSG. They're in first place, as we've pointed out here. So it's kind of keep doing what you're doing. Keep pushing this meta to something that works for you guys. Play around adapting out of the jungle, who's having himself a phenomenal phase. I think it's riding the hot hand on this team week in, week out. I think Benji has also started to put together a good performance. The duo lane on this team has really hit their stride. I think momentum is key for this squad, because we've seen what a slow start can do, and they made it to the finals of the midseason tournament. But now they're on a red-hot streak, so if they can kind of keep the wind at their sails, keep working this meta forward, I expect big things to continue as they play every other team a second time.
I think highlighting adapting there is a good choice. He and Big Man Tings in particular have really impressed. And MYFLIN, you were frozen in awe at the first look at Radiance. Some quick thoughts on what the first place team is looking like for you.
I mean, it's hard to say what hasn't been said already because I didn't hear what Dave said. So at risk of reiterating, these guys are looking dominant. I think they get a lot less respect than they've really warranted themselves. A lot of the time when you hear players in general talking about the best teams in the league, Ghost Gaming comes to mind. But I think Radiance should be brought to that conversation, not just because of their standings, but because of how they've won their games. Always convincing W's. They're not dragging these games out to an hour long. They're always winning with the exact same strategy. They've identified their personality, their play style very early on in phase 2. They pulled themselves out of that rut, and it's looked incredibly strong. All the players have got diverse god pools now. I think as long as they're able to maintain that and not allow them to get in their own heads like we saw at the tail end of phase 1, they're going to continue to just absolutely dominate.
Well, some of the teams that are going to go up against them are going to be teams like Space Station, who has also looked awfully good so far here in phase number 2. This team feels like a little bit more of a wild card than most of the other top teams, though, Myf. Do you see it that same way?
I think so, and that's going to be any team that has players like Raph on it, right? These are guys who are almost completely contingent on what kind of headspace they're bringing into any individual week, unless you're talking about Cherio, who, as Finch likes to say, is consistently and perpetually pressed. This guy is constantly stressing out about whether or not his team's going to perform to the level that he knows they're capable of, because each individual piece of Space Station, in my mind, are in contention for best in slot in the league. Each one of these guys are veteran players who can perform at that absolute top level. Their teamwork, when it's meshing well, is phenomenal. They bring potentially the most diverse god pools, a la their mid laner, Dardes, playing whatever he chooses to on any given week. I think Space Station has the added benefit of being this team that is kind of ethereal in their playstyle, and that you don't really know what god picks they're looking to go for, which version they're going to bring. Sometimes Space Station wants to blow you out in the early. Sometimes they play that Sanguine will wait till 50 minutes and then blow you out in the late. I think that Space Station is not only a dark horse in contention for that number 1 spot, but a team that needs to be a real threat recognized by all the other players in the league.
I think it's a good point that you said earlier. Ghost is often the team that gets talked about near the top end, but Radiance and Space Station certainly deserve that credit. But Dave, there's a reason that Ghost Gaming gets so much press. When they win awfully convincingly.
Yeah, it's not particularly close. I think it's very clear what Ghost does, right? I mean, they push you in the early game, they build this massive lead, and then they try to snowball things and finish things quickly. And Ghost, the only team in that top 3 that didn't trade a game with one another. They did lose to one of the other 2 top teams, but then they also lost to Sanguine earlier on, putting them here in this 3rd slot. The only thing I think that you can be concerned about with this Ghost squad is that teams know that they want to get very aggressive early, and if that early aggressive pressure can be matched and maybe outdone, then it just is a in-game mechanical basis type of decision. But despite being in this 3rd place slot, at their best, Ghost look near unbeatable, but they have been taken to the brink a couple of times, so I don't imagine they slip any further than top 3 here in this phase, because these guys have a clear-cut game plan. You know what they want to do. If Mike is having himself a set, it almost doesn't matter what the other 4 players are doing on the team. Sam is in that same conversation as well. Multifaceted, I think, in how they can build these early leads. So I love what I've seen out of Ghost. I expect that to continue here as they play every other team a second time.
Yeah, it turns out having your jungle and your support, the 2 most competitive or most important roles in competitive, if you ask me, really, really strong, is usually a pretty good recipe for success, and that's really been the case for Ghost so far. Sanguine is the other team, MYFLIN, in the top 4, and we feel like the top 4, the top half of the league, has separated themselves pretty nicely from the bottom half, and Sanguine's certainly in that top half discussion. A bit of a slower start to phase 2, but they've really found their stride.
Sanguine is a team that is almost the antithesis of Ghost, right? They don't want to play that early game phase. They don't want, if they could load into a match at 25 minutes completely even and just have everyone be level 15 in the game, all 10 players, I'm sure they'd be absolutely happy with it. And I think that is simultaneously their greatest strength and also their greatest weakness. Because Sanguine is so conflict adverse in the early game, because they're so unwilling to put up that fight, some teams can absolutely just steamroll them. I think Ghost can very easily just run away with a huge lead and then not allow Sanguine to get to that team fight phase they're so accustomed to. But the strength of it is, if we are 30 minutes into a game and Sanguine is one of the teams in that match, I think you would be a fool not to vote for them to win. I mean, these guys play so incredibly well around each other that it just looks absolutely dominant. I think if they could just clean up the early game a little bit, maybe even move their aggression forward even 3-4 minutes normally, they would be potentially just the best team in the league.
They've got a lot of talent over there. And you know what also stands out to me about Sanguine is that they always play the best gods. They're not messing around with weird god pools. They look at the tier list and they go, yep, one up top, please, and that's what they pick. And that's usually a pretty good way to play a MOBA, if you ask me. Now, I mentioned a quiz here, fellas. This is going to be something a little bit different. It's not just for you. It's also for all of you in chat. So there should be a little extension thing that you can click right around here-ish. I don't know how well that's going to work, but hopefully it does. And if you link your Twitch account, you'll be able to put your name up on the leaderboard. What do you get for winning? Endless adoration from chat, and everyone thinks you're really smart. That's what we got for you here this week. We're just doing this as a little test run initially, but maybe in the future we can look towards something like that. Also, worth noting, it does matter how fast you answer these questions. So speed is key. Let's look at the very first question. Question number 1, who is Odin's wife? Dave and Myth, you got any thoughts here? Your multiple choice answers are Freya, Frigg, Loki, or Hel.
That one. Frigg.
Frigg. I buzzed first, though.
Yeah, wait, what am I
I'm going to give that one to
buzz?
Dave.
Do I just yell?
No, I don't care.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know any of these rules. We're literally doing this on the fly, and there are no rules as far as I'm concerned. So you can do whatever you want. You were right, by the way. It was Frigg. Yes. Frigg is the answer. Not playable in Smite, but who knows what the future will hold. Question number 2. This one is going to be a little bit more esports focused here for us, of course, on the SMITEPro League stream. This player is the only one to compete at 6, that's how many there have been, World Championships. Your options,
Captain
Adapting,
Twig.
Barracuda, Trix Tank, or Captain Twig.
Twig.
Yeah, I mean, I locked it in already.
You didn't even finish the question.
I didn't need it to be finished, Dave. That's how sick I am.
Really?
Saying,
I mean, come on.
Adapting
is a 2-time.
Are we just saying showing up at Worlds? If you play in that tournament bracket, we're considering that.
That's correct.
I'm putting faith in MYFLIN on this one. My history's not as extensive as Myth, so I'll put my weight on his answer here. I'll say Twig as well.
All right, it's a good answer, I will say. But I mean, you got to look at Adapting, the 2-time. I will say that there were a lot more overall players who have been to every single World Championship before last year. We lost a bunch of big names. I think last year you could have said Barracuda if it were the first 5 Smite World Championships. But once we got to 6, things got a little bit different there. I do believe you guys are going to be feeling pretty good about this one whenever we're ready to go, which is right now, it is indeed Captain Twig. And that brings us to our third and final question, one that I think might give you guys the most trouble. This one a little bit more numbers based. So if you guys brought your calculators here today, I hope you have. What percent of damage does Final Judgment Thoth Ultimate do if instantly fired? 40%, 50%, 60%, or 70%?
Oh, man. Mid laners and your weird abilities, man. Come on.
Look,
why don't you just have normal abilities?
It's always somewhere in the middle. It's never the lowest. It's never the highest.
We're all in the middle. You give us 40, 50, 60.
50%. I'm buzzing
50%. So if normally you got to do the ho, and he does the hands and everything. He's writing stuff down in his book. If you just go ha and you just fire right away, you think you're dealing 50% damage, Dave?
You're tricking me. Yes, 50%. I'm sticking with it. This is bait.
Myth, what are your thoughts?
It's got to be 40 or 60 because Dave is very seldom right about anything. I'm going 40.
Dude.
Oh, MYFLIN steals it away, though, of course, it's all about how fast you do it as well. 40% is the correct answer on that one. Nice try, though, Dave. I'm the one who ordered them, and I made sure that it wasn't always B.
That's right.
Everyone always guesses B. It feels like it's always going to be right. That's what we don't do about it here. Thanks, everyone, if you played along. Of course, this is our first test run of our interactive quiz. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I believe we will be getting some answer of who was on top of the leaderboards at some point during the show. Oh, and I'm just getting word you didn't link your account. So you're very smart in terms of Smite knowledge, but maybe not so much in terms of following instructions on that one. So make sure next time that everyone links their account so that we can actually give you the proper shout out there. Okay, back to the task of going over every single SPL team. And number 5th on the standings is Pittsburgh Knights. This team, just hard to lock them down on what they're going to do. I feel like them being in 5th is almost surprising based on how they've played in some of these sets. Dave, what have you seen from PK so far?
You know, I think in phase 1, right, it was EUNITED was kind of the team where you truly just don't know what team you're going to get on any given day. And I think some of that has now shifted over to the Knights here in phase 2. I love that kind of we drop off with Sanguine playing the best picks. You're not going to see anything out of left field, where it's kind of the opposite with the Knights, where these guys have kind of specific picks that work for them. I'm going to shout out Neil and his Robin support that it was in the game. You know, he loaded in there, and the rest of the team was able to win around him. You know, it was there. And I just think it's such a difficult team to lock down, where week after week we're deciding on who's going to win these matchups. And it always gives me a pause whenever we come across the Knights, because we have seen the late game powerhouse team fighting team that will not be denied on any given day. Cubo Fred runs wild, etc., etc. And then we've also seen kind of the slow start, not going to call it troll, but you know, kind of interesting type meta picks that I can't quite grasp. So I think, you know, this team starts to sharpen that edge a little bit, you know, maybe start to contest for some of those higher spots. I think from what we've seen, right where they belong, and I think a bright future ahead as they start to sharpen up some of those edges as the phase moves on.
Love me some Neil Mobb, but no more Robin support. Please.
No thanks.
Seriously, I don't want to see that ever again, pretty much. Next up would be the Renegades. And MYFLIN, this is a team that now is facing down the barrel of a roster change. Talk to me about what you've seen from them in phase 2 and how you think this informs their decision to bench Solo Patrol for this week.
Renegades is a team that is very evocative for me. No team makes me feel emotions like Renegades does, because when they're ahead, they get really far ahead. I'm talking 5,000 gold up, 15 minutes into the game, and then it seems like every single time they hit that threshold, oh, we're 5,000 gold up, let's stop doing everything. Let's stop it. We're going to just wait a little bit and wait for the enemy team to come to us, and that's really where they start to flounder with their leads. They start to fall behind. They're not really getting proactive anymore. It's a team that is just absolutely suffused with individual talented players that don't seem to work very well together in general. And then when Renegades falls behind, it's kind of that same issue where, all right, well, 4 people are barreling down our Phoenix. Let's not use a single active. Let's not use a single ultimate. Give up that Phoenix. We'll defend the next one. They group up on the second Phoenix. Okay, we're not defending that one either. It seems like Renegades has the capacity to win. It's just that they don't know how to execute on it, especially when you could see them getting these leads. You see them performing incredibly well. It just it very seldom pans out.
Yeah, it's just been a little bit tough sledding for them. The same can be said for Obey Alliance, Dave. Only 1 win for Obey so far in this phase, and it was up against the winless EUNITED. But as of late, I feel like Obey has been trending up a bit.
They have, you know, and I think I can kind of copy paste a lot of what MYFLIN said about the Renegades over towards Obey. How many times this phase have we seen them jump out to a very early lead? You know, they get a few kills on the board. I think the issue has been pushing those kills, pushing, you know, the triple kill on the mid lane or on the hunter, whatever it is, pushing that to a wider gold lead. Time and time again, we see these early ganks, these early skirmishes work out. A lot of it brought by Sino. Ducky started to play better as well. But then putting map pressure elsewhere, building up the gold through farm, through objectives, is I think where we've seen Obey slow down a little bit. So I do think they have been trending upwards. Absolutely. I think you clean up this early game. Next step, clean up that mid game, and then hopefully by the end game you're able to grab some wins here. So they've got to win in the win column. They took Ghost to a pretty long set. I think with some time, this Obey squad will be looking better.
Absolutely. MYFLIN, we're running pretty close to the time limit here, so very quickly on EUNITED, a team that has yet to find a win, but has gone to 3 games in the majority of their sets in phase 2.
I mean, I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of parity between those lower tier teams, and that, again, there are very large glaring issues you can see with the United. It seems like they haven't really nailed down their identity yet. Once they do, they can start to practice it, hone that blade, and use it in some actual matches. Until we see Guy, Jay, and Snoopy get a little bit more comfortable in that long lane, I want to reserve judgment. But I do want to harken back to Hindu making the call in that United versus Obey set. The loser of it would be the donkey of the league. This time it's United.
Has been so far, but still waiting to see if they're able to find their first win. Maybe it'll be this week. They go up against Ghost Gaming on Saturday. Tough draw if that's the goal there. Friday's schedule today, going to be an interesting one. We get to see ROWE up against Yarkor in that short lane, which should be pretty crazy, and PK trying to punch up against SSG. Also have to take a look at our predictions for the week and see how everyone has been doing so far in that category. Finch still up on top, the only one with a B. Gormizer now getting pretty close, and MYFLIN still below the community so far. You'll get there one day, buddy. Maybe it'll be this week. Let's take a look at what you've picked and what everyone has picked. We've all got a pretty clean sweep for SSG and Sanguine here today. It isn't until we get to that Renegades Obey set. A lot of blue votes there, Myth. Normally you're a little bit alone in that category. We'll see if they're able to pull off the victory up against the Renegades with ROWE in tow in the short lane. Thanks, everyone, for watching the SPL Waiting Room. Appreciate you guys sticking with us through our technical difficulties. As a result, we got to make sure that we're ready for the SPL, so we're going to go to a quick wait screen. We'll be right back with the start of the Pro League in Week 6.